I was about 4 or 5 stories underneath the lowest level of DIA. I was standing in an extremely dark, long, and thin tunnel. Looking up behind me, I could barely make out the dim slit of light from the open door I had come through. As I walked deeper into the darkness, my eyes began to adjust, allowing me to see a spooky red glow coming from the end of the tunnel. The exit. It took me a good deal of time to finally reach it.
I'll explain what the heck.
I gasped.
My game
I was
crashed.
standing in a cavernous area so high I couldn't even make out the ceiling above me. I looked back. The tunnel was dark, impenetrable, and above the entryway, words were carved. The abyss looks back. I shook my head, looking towards the cavern, steeling myself, and I took the first steps forward, shuddering as I heard each footstep echo loudly
Oh,
around
shoot.
me.
No.
Suddenly, a dim beam shot out from above, illuminating a small metal table with a single chair. I wondered if there was some sort of movement activation system, and I became more aware of myself.
Hello, Shy.
I walked closer
There we
and
go.
saw 2 things. A pool of dark, viscous
I hope
liquids
Jay is
flowing in
doing
the
better
light
today.
to think about, and a smooth black binder.
So that's the confused when OBS is being weird.
To a section that read, "Procedure, hope to God it doesn't happen.
Okay,
In
allergies.
case of breach." Mystified, I stepped around the pool of liquid and flipped the binder closed, trying to see what it was called. Scrawled across the top of the binder in white ink were the words, "Quarantine procedures." I tried flipping it back to the procedure, accidentally letting it go too soon. The cover of the binder
Trying to check
snapped
with my
into the
desk a
table
little
with
bit so it's
force,
easier to actually
creating a
play the
sound
video
that
game, but
rang out loud and true.
who knows if
in the
that'll
abyss.
even work.
I cringed and then cowered. It started immediately. A low, rumbling, yet strangely high-pitched moaning. It was like I was hearing several people make
I
the
know I'm
same
going to
sound
die,
at once. I looked
but
around,
I can still
trying to
try
find the source of the sound, but saw nothing.
and hope that
Moved forward,
OBS
apprehensive,
won't
and realized
die.
that I was nearing a great chasm. I could barely make out
Knowing
the
my
edge of
luck
it.
though, OBS will die.
I stopped short and peered over it, seeing what looked like nothing. Or maybe it was just that the chasm went on forever. Either way, it looked empty and endless. But as I stood there, staring below, I began to make out something
21,
sick. A mass of
21,
what looked like blackened human bodies,
21.
together, melted to one another, writhing as if in
21.
pain or
We're good.
pleasure. Suddenly, I saw the whites of 2
And
eyes,
are you
all
loading up
looking
another
towards me,
one?
glaring.
You are. Okay.
I yelped, reeling backwards and
God
falling.
damn it.
Behind me, a clanging sound rang out, and I looked back to see
No.
an enormous
Stop
coagulated
you,
blob of
please.
burnt black bodies near the small metal table. A few of its
Stop.
hands held the binder,
Thank you.
ripping it to shreds. I stood up, and it saw me and froze for a moment before making a horrific sound and heaving towards me.
Why must you do this again?
And ran as fast as I could, hearing the moaning grow louder in the chasm to the right of me. And behind me, I could hear it scuffling, scraping, screaming,
Please
trying
look.
to
There
keep
we
up,
go.
trying to get me. I was nearing an incredibly high wall, and I ran towards it, hoping for some miraculous way out.
There we go.
I heard a muted low whistle and looked to my left. There, underneath a small ball.
Okay, I need at least 2 certain things to be good. Cows.
He was wearing
And
a
tree.
gas mask. His messy, slightly wet hair looked black beneath the light, and
Chickens,
stood up at odd
chickens.
angles against the mask's strap.
Beep.
He waved and then beckoned me over. Scared, I took a quick look behind me, and there it was, a great roiling mass of hands and mouths and bare, sinewy arms, slowly pulling and squeezing, undulating its way towards me.
Sheep, listen, I just need your wool.
Stupid, unable to move. I blinked and then leapt into action, running as fast as I could towards the man. He swung the door behind him open as I approached, and through it I could see a brightly lit
Okay, yeah.
staircase
My brain
leading up.
forgot why I needed cows for a minute because my brain's still waking
Far
up.
away to see what it was. The man gestured to the door with
Forgot
his
the whole
hand
reason that I was doing this somehow, and I don't know how.
I wanted to ask him so many questions. My voice jerked short.
I got those, and I just need to get a tree.
Not violently or angrily, but like he was trying to save my life. I staggered forward, my heart pounding in my chest, my mouth
You know what,
dry.
I'm gonna go get those
Behind
pumpkins.
me, the door was
I'm gonna
creaking
need
closed.
food.
I turned and yelled a frantic thank you. He gave me a thumbs up before turning
I
towards
will
the
grab
monster,
at least,
unholstering
I'll grab
his
maybe
pistol
1 or
in his
2
hand.
of them.
And as the door swung fully shut, I
Yeah,
heard
this is far too much for me to actually get
fire and
myself.
saw in quick
I
succession
screw up myself, let's get all of them, there's no
enormous
speedy.
explosions of bright light through the cracks.
I'm so used to grabbing all of them no matter what anyways.
But they looked much brighter than what simple gunpowder would cause. A high-pitched screaming and low-pitched yelling sounded out in unison.
Doesn't look like there's
Raising
any
hands on my arm and making me trip back
too
slowly
high.
upstairs before I turned and ran all the
I
way up.
am going
As I
to
neared the black door,
need
signal
a tall
became
rose
clear.
though.
A lion
Well, unless I find
wearing
bone meal, or not bone meal,
wearing a bejeweled
a
necklace.
skeleton spawner. I can just make a bone
Into quarters.
meal spawner in a
Symbols
sense.
in each section were worn,
And just, you know,
but I couldn't quite make them out. Perched atop the shield was
bone meal
a
grass,
body
and hope I
with
get
the shape of a 23-pointed
all the
star.
stuff I need.
I only know this because I had time to count.
Stuff equals flowers.
Black door was a tinted glass.
Though I know some of them aren't
A
flowers.
red button projected on the small touch screen to the right of the door frame repeatedly.
So I know
cursed the elevator
ones
from
as either insects or
rang out, and the scream rose up again.
brings many of like wither roses, which is still flower, but that involves a wither, and I'm not messing with the wither. Okay, well, I see village, so I guess it was kind of pointless to kill those sheep.
Inside, it was the size of a small room and lowly lit. A smooth
But
female
still
voice
good if I
rang
ever
out.
go out anyways.
Reading sub-basement 23. Decontamination.
Okay,
in
pig,
progress.
pig, pig.
Perplexed, I looked around me, and then I looked
Hey.
up. Above me
A
were
buttload of
hundreds
bees for some reason.
jets.
Ow.
I covered my face not a second too soon as the jets activated, spraying me with an unusual, scentless substance that seemingly boiled off.
Okay, I could use horses for leather, but like,
hair
no.
soaking wet. The substance was so cold it burned, and I tried wiping it off with my shirt. Another tinny beep sounded,
Cows.
and the
Okay,
smooth
we
female
have all the cows we need. I just need to get some wheat and
Basement level.
make a
glass
cow
door
farm.
slid open, and I lurched out, disoriented, into a lightly illuminated room with a single black door across the
You
way.
know what?
The walls were covered with strange.
Actually, I don't need to do this. I have wood.
Recognize as being part of any human alphabet. I stared at them in
When I first saw, I may have
wonder,
wood.
placed them, slowly revolving around the room as I looked. I stopped at the spot where the elevator was, but saw only a blank wall with a single keypad projected on it. I shuddered and headed towards the black door, which opened effortlessly, and suddenly I was back in the 300 square feet.
Oh, shoot, I made too many.
Back where I began. Behind me, the heavy black door swung shut.
Okay,
with a
I will
resolute
just
boom.
take into preparation
Gas
those
mask
things.
lying next to it was gone. The reddish, sickly door was
I
closed.
do need
Tight
to
stuck out like before.
make
To the right of me, the locked
a
door
axe
was
to
locked
this
no
lot
more,
easier.
and I quickly exited the room, hearing it swing shut as I left. The tunnels were brighter now, and I wondered how much time had passed while I was down there. As I was exiting the maintenance door, I ran into my coworker. She stopped dead in her tracks, looking at me with worried, suspicious eyes.
Hey, you're still here?
One of those.
It's just, I talked to the second inspector. He said you went home hours ago. Or at least thought you did. Said you never checked back in with him.
She looked closer at me.
Hey, are you okay? And why are you wet? Did something, strange happen? I heard a noise, like screaming.
Yeah, I'm fine. No, I'm not. I'm sick. I don't feel well at all. I think I may have fainted down there, or blacked out. Stress, maybe.
Is that another village?
I'm gonna go home.
And I'll be fine, but I think that's another village over there. Could be useful for me.
I didn't get a chance to fix the fans down there, so yeah, gonna go home. See you Monday. I staggered past her towards the exit to the airport.
Okay, sure. Get some rest.
Oh, actually,
I haven't been able to get any rest. I haven't been able to stop thinking about what happened, what I saw, what is underneath DIA, who that man was. My mind keeps fluctuating between the idea that the government or some other clandestine cabal may be protecting us all from that monster. And
I don't want to hail the source, but I have to, sadly.
not be that they're trying to weaponize it or keeping it for further study. Either way, I am afraid. Afraid
Okay,
of what I
so we
saw
will.
and the implications
I don't need to
of hiding something like that in a
take out
place
wheat
so
or grow
many
some wheat.
people
We can just take a wheat here and,
basis.
or
And
sorry,
I
hay,
fear that
and
I
turn it
will
into wheat.
slowly mad, because when I sleep, a single short phrase rattles around and around and around in my brain. The abyss looks back.
Well, okay, I need all of you cows to follow me, please.
In our final tale, we present an epic story from author Jared Roberts. It concerns a man and his family and how the events of the past seem to come full circle in a most disturbing way. Are the traumatic events in the life of his father and uncle now revisiting him? The man seeks to unravel the mystery, which started one day when his father began to reveal the
Okay,
truth.
I think this is my issue.
Performing
If
this tale,
there's
are
what,
Mike
yeah,
Delgado,
that's my issue.
Peter Dyseth, Nicole Doolin, Atticus Jackson, Addison Peacock.
Having the render distance to be like max is gonna kill my
And now, the No Sleep
laptop.
Podcast is proud to present our production of the tale titled
And my game.
Dad Finally Told Me What Happened That Day.
Just when I find a half decent Spawn. My game card. Why?
You know how most of the time you feel like your life pretty much makes sense? You have your family and your friends and happy memories, even when bad things happen. I felt that way most of the 32 years I've been alive. Some things have happened lately that really, well, they take that feeling away, you know? And when I think I'm putting it back in order, I got it all wrong. So, well, I need to talk about it. All of it. Just put it out in words. Because maybe if I do, it'll start making sense. It started when I went to visit my dad about a month ago. We have a good relationship. We just, never talked all that much. His health is starting to decline because he drinks too much. He was a little wistful this time. We were just, having a beer, not saying much. When he says he has something he needs to tell me.
You're old enough, you may as well know.
I didn't know what he was talking about, so I say he should just tell me.
Remember that time I got home from work real upset and I wouldn't tell you what happened?
I did remember. It wasn't something I would ever forget. He wasn't just upset. He was scared of something. I'd never seen Dad scared of anything in my life until then. He was the kind of guy whose bar fights are town legends. I also remember he told me never to ask him about it. So I never did. A little background. When I was really young, like 4 or 5, my dad and I lived in a cheap apartment on the ground floor. I don't remember much about it. I know I didn't like it there. The kids weren't nice to play with. They'd steal my toys. It was just a grimy area. We were having tough times, and this was all we could do. Probably what I remember most about the place was how I would get woken up. Not every night, but just randomly. These flashing lights would wake me up. I don't remember being too worried about it at first. I just assumed it was lots of lightning in that area, I guess. Yeah, I was 5. I didn't know jack about meteorology. One night, my dad had my uncle and his wife over for crab leg dinner. I remember it distinctly because it was the first time I'd ever eaten crab. Well, while they were talking, I just casually mentioned the lightning the night before.
There wasn't no lightning, right?
I thought he was clowning around. So I laughed and told him how the flashing lights woke me up. And my uncle got serious. And that freaked me out. Because they were always silly when they got together. They asked me more questions about the lights. Nothing I recalled exactly. But they decided I was probably seeing headlights from cars driving by, shining on the curtains.
Let's try this again.
I guess I believed them. But, after that, I'd always get nervous when the flashing lights would wake me up. Because I knew it wasn't lightning anymore. A few times I called for my dad when it happened, but when he'd get to my room, there was nothing to see. He started telling me it was all in my head. We moved out of that apartment after a year or so, when Dad's handyman business picked up. Well, the flashing stopped when we left. So I came to believe it was a combination of passing cars and my imagination. It wasn't something I ever gave much thought to again until that talk with Dad. A little more background. Another time I was helping my dad out on a job. This was a bigger job, kind of rebuilding a whole house, so he had a few other guys working with us.
There we go.
Some of them I knew, and some of them I'd never seen before. I was used to it. It's what he always did on bigger jobs. Well, I was sitting off on my own, about to eat my lunch and listening to my CD Walkman. Dad generally didn't eat much. He just continued to work. So he was still busy on the site. Suddenly, I noticed a guy walking towards me from the general direction of the site. I didn't remember seeing this guy actually working, but he was making a beeline straight for me. He was an older guy. Head was shaved.
Yeah, man.
Wearing a Ramones t-shirt. He sat right down beside me. Way too close. I didn't say a word. I took off my headphones because I didn't want to be rude. I said hi. He told me my dad was looking for me and I should be heading back as soon as I finished my sandwich. That was the plan anyway, and I said that was fine. To make things less awkward, I said I liked the Ramones. He didn't even seem to know who they were. Well, after sitting with him for a few moments,
Come on, villager. Why are you in here?
I froze. He turned around, fixed me with the most
Ooh, true leather?
I've ever seen. I didn't
That is actually big.
until then. It was like he wanted me dead. I remember wondering what I should do if he attacked me. But he
We'll probably use that true leather to make a 1 or 2 books and to go from there.
Then he stalked off, leaving me puzzled and terrified. It was probably 85 degrees out, but I was shivering. I put the rest of my sandwich away and went back to work. I asked my dad who that guy was a little later. He said he had no idea what I was talking about. So I described the guy. Dad said nobody like that even worked on the site.
Come on, please, 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 please.
Some weird
It's getting dark and I don't want to be out here in the night.
has a whole new meaning. Things I didn't catch before stand out. Like, my sandwich was still in my box when that guy talks to me. You know what I brought for lunch. Okay, so now you got all that. Here's what Dad told me. When I was 15, Dad was called out on a job to some house way on the other side of the bay. In the town I grew up in, you have two sides. One side of the bay has all the beaches and the mall, and the other side has downtown and lots of woods. The old apartment was on the beachy side. The house he was called to was a quarter of the way to the next town on the woodsy side. So he shows up in his van
Okay.
with all his tools.
That's it. I'm not worrying about him. I'm going to bed.
No vehicles in the driveway except the rusting hulk of what used to be a 70s model Chevy. The house is in pretty bad shape, but he went up to the front door. Before he could knock, he saw a note telling him to come right in and they'd be back soon. He didn't like going into someone's house without them there because he didn't want to be accused of anything. But he'd driven so far already, so he went ahead. He got to work on repairing some wood rot around the
There we
window
go.
frames. He's there for nearly an hour when he thought he heard someone. He went to check. There was still no one in the driveway except for his van. Hello? He heard what sounded like a door slam. Now, Dad was not the kind of guy to get nervous.
Come
He
on.
told me he was
There
starting
we
to get creeped out. And that just pissed him off. So he stomped around the house. He saw the back door was wide open, leading into this overgrown backyard. He wonders if maybe the wind was moving the door. He closed it. going
No.
back
Oh
into the
my
house,
god.
decided to just
Stupid villager.
play some once over, just in case. He looks around downstairs. There's nothing much to see. The house is in bad shape, but it's furnished. It's kept fairly neat and tidy. The electricity still works. Someone was definitely living there, just, not able to keep the place up. So he's pretty much satisfied his concerns. He goes upstairs to look around anyway. Upstairs is much the same as downstairs. Tidy, just
No.
in need of repairs.
Oh my god. Villager, I swear to god.
Now, Dad's never been much of an intuitive kind of guy, so this must have been some bad vibes. So anyway, the last room at the end of the upstairs hall is closed. It's jammed in the frame somehow. He gets it open. It's just a bedroom, all painted yellow furniture. He spots some wood rot around the window frames upstairs too. He was told
There.
there were 3 windows to
Now,
do
no
this with.
freaking villager should be able to get in here.
When he does, the sill just lifts right off. And there are papers and things stuffed between the walls.
That's lovely.
It doesn't surprise him. He pulls the papers out because he plans to go ahead and do this window too because he's like that. He wouldn't ask for more money. He just wants to get the whole job done. So when he pulls the papers out, he sees it's mostly photographs. Now, Dad's big on privacy, but he happened to see the photographs, and he knew he was looking at something bad. He started flipping through them. They were all pretty much the same. The back of each picture is dated. Every one of them is a picture of a little boy sleeping. Dad recognized me in that ground floor bedroom right away. He remembered my stories about the flashing lights, and he knew it wasn't in my head at all. Someone had been taking pictures of me sleeping for almost a year. He told me there weren't any pictures of other boys either. Whoever took the photos was only taking pictures of me. So he called the police, of course. The listed owner for the house was an elderly couple living in Vancouver. They used to summer in the home, but just hadn't gotten around to it in years. They didn't even notice they were still paying the electric bill. They had no idea about the pictures or hiring my dad. It was a dead end. I had so many questions after he told me this. For one, why would someone who was so far away from our apartment drive 30 minutes at night to take pictures of me? How'd they even know me? How'd they fixate on that one apartment or kid? And why call my dad to find the stash of pictures after a decade of leaving us alone? Well, Dad actually had an answer for one of those questions. But in a way, I find this even creepier. It turns out he went to the wrong address. He wrote it down wrong. When the police checked his answering machine tape for clues, he was actually called to a much closer home by a completely innocent guy. He stumbled onto this house and the stash of pictures by a completely random misunderstanding. So, who left the note on the front door? It took me a couple of days to process what this meant. I knew it scared the crap out of me from the get-go. I tried talking to my dad about it, but he wasn't in the mood. Shut it right down. I pressed him a little on the flashing lights. He told me I should ask my Uncle Matt. So I did. Now, my Uncle Matt and my dad, they get along great. Never seen them fight in my life. But they're, very different. Matt's easygoing, jokey, always has a kind word for everyone. That's why I was shocked when he actually got mad. He told me never to ask him about it again and to leave him alone. That would have been the end of it right there. But my bi-weekly phone call to my mom was due, and I didn't really have anything else to talk to her about. So I told her what Dad told me, what I remembered, and what happened with Uncle Matt.
I think that just duped my items.
The hushed way she said it, like someone might overhear, chilled me. I didn't even know what she was talking about. There were some odd things.
Because I should have the items that I do, but I do.
This is a version of it that
I don't want them, but I mean,
dad and Uncle Matt had a younger
it's
sister.
the game's fault for crap.
I never knew her as Aunt Flora because she was gone long before I was born. When Flora was 8 or 9, weird things started happening to her. My dad only talked about them when he'd been drinking gin, Mom said. Gin made him brood. She used to hide his gin because he'd freak her out when she talked about these things. Like this one time, my dad woke up because he heard noises in the kitchen. He came out to see what was up. Flora was making a peanut butter and sugar sandwich in the middle of the night. He asked her what she was doing, because if their mom caught them in the kitchen that hour, well, they'd have their butts reddened. So Flora told him she had to make a sandwich and a picture for Mr. Chaude Froy. Mom said Dad would shudder when he said that part of the story. His voice got real low when he'd say the name. So my dad got mad at Flora because he thought she was being dumb or half dreaming. Then she showed him the picture she took. It was a drawing of a boy sleeping with
See if I can quickly run to that sort of village.
Now, my dad, being the oldest child, was very protective of Matt and Flora. He immediately felt something was wrong. He took the picture and tore it up, and he told Flora she had to get back to bed right away. She told him
Any cows I
Chaude
see him
Froy
killing.
would be mad because she promised him. Dad asked her who this person was and what he looked like because he meant to tell their mom. She said she didn't know what he looked like, that he talked to her from the drain in the bathroom sink. He told her all sorts of things, and she'd been talking to
Oh, Buddha candy made
At this point, my
from
mom said she didn't want to talk about
cornflowers.
it anymore. It was giving her the willies.
I thought cornflowers gave white blood eye.
Mom was always kind of superstitious about things. Like, she would be afraid to say the names of certain diseases. She'd never say cancer as if saying it causes it. She said just saying the name Chaude Froy made her feel like she was being watched. But I asked her more questions, and she kept going. She said my dad didn't believe Flora. She must have been dreaming or just imagined the
I
whole thing.
believe.
He took the sandwich and ate it himself after
It's
saying
right up here.
He remembered the sandwich well because peanut butter and sugar was not something they've ever made in that household. He had no idea where she'd even heard of it. So he forgot all about what happened for a few days or weeks, until one night he woke up to pee and hear funny noises as he got to the bathroom. The light wasn't on. Flora was in there, alone. He stopped outside the door to listen. She was whispering a whole conversation in there. He figured she was half asleep and didn't know what she was doing. He went into
We're at 11. I think it's like 27
himself
or so for a full set.
in the drain. Mom said he would get a distant look when he talked about this and just set the gin down like he couldn't drink anymore. My dad, he can always drink more. The voice he heard sounded cold and metallic, probably coming through the pipes, he figured. But it scared the crap out of him. What it was actually saying, though, was even worse. Mom said he'd try to imitate the metallic voice. Come outside, Flora. Come on outside. No one has to sleep out here. Flora whispered into the sink that she couldn't, because her brother might catch her. And the strange voice told her, hearing it made my dad's hair stand on end. My mom said it's the most scared he'd ever been. Not one to freeze, my dad pulled Flora out of the bathroom and slammed the door. He warned her never to talk to Mr. Chaude Froy again, because he was bad. He ended up telling his mom, and he found where some pipes had been messed with under the house. They also found some drawings of my dad and Uncle Matt sleeping. They were all burned right away, and his mom forbade them to talk about it. They didn't handle scandals like that too well at the time.
Actually,
But my dad saw some of the drawings before they were burned, and they weren't drawn by Flora. I've never heard anything about any of this before. Dad and Uncle Matt almost never talked about Flora, and when they did, it was always cryptic. I didn't know what this had to do with me, but my hand was shaking holding the phone.
it's
Thought she
getting
was
done.
But she said that was just the beginning. My mom usually gets tired of talking after 10 minutes or so, so I was surprised. Maybe she needed to get it out of her system. So she said, after that, Flora used to complain about flashing lights in her bedroom. Everyone just figured she was seeing the light from the lighthouse because it was still active back then. She complained about it for nearly 2 years, saying she had trouble sleeping. So her mom finally got sick of it and put thicker curtains up in her bedroom. And she still kept complaining. They ended up getting her a sleeping mask. Problem solved. Well, not long after this, Dad, Matt, and Flora went to a friend's house to hang out because he had a record player and his parents would give him any records he wanted. They'd all just, sit around and listen to music together. So Flora left to go home before Dad and Matt did. But she never made it home. They never found her body. In theory, she could still be alive, but nobody really believes that. Mom thinks Dad and Uncle Matt always felt personally responsible for it, because if they just left with her, she might still be alive. My mom figures that's why the flashing lights things upset Dad and Uncle Matt so much. And I guess I was opening old wounds by asking about it. But at the same time, I find it really spooky that the same thing would happen to both me and Flora. And it was upsetting that they didn't take it more seriously when it happened to me. And, well, I also felt really bad about hurting Uncle Matt. I visited him the next day to apologize. I told him Mom explained everything, and I had no idea. He wasn't mad anymore. Actually, he apologized to me, too, because he said I deserved to know. He said there was a little bit more to it than what my mom had described. A week before she disappeared, Flora had started complaining about the flashing lights again. They figured either she was forgetting to put her mask on or it had been in her head the whole time. Then, a day or two before she disappeared, he couldn't remember. She woke up and her mask was gone. She couldn't find it anywhere. He figured she just didn't want to wear it anymore. But now, he wasn't so sure. Another weird thing. Around the same time, they found footprints in the snow outside the house. It had snowed almost 3 feet overnight. The footprints led out of the woods behind the house and went straight to Flora's window. The thing Uncle Matt said creeped him out the most was that the footprints of the window didn't face towards the window, like looking in the house. They faced back towards the woods, where there was nothing but trees. For the footprints to not have been covered in by snow, someone had to have walked to Flora's bedroom sometime after midnight and stood there, staring into the woods in a blizzard. Strangely, he said they never really worried about it much. Everyone knew everyone there. It just only stands out because the day she disappeared, they got a call from Timmy Jean,
Right?
the boy with the records, telling them he just got a new one.
Yes.
Uncle Matt said Timmy was an only child. He figured the records were how Timmy's parents got him off their hands and made him some friends. So he was normally pretty excited when he got a record to share. But this day, he sounded flat, emotionless. Dad had to ask if he was even speaking to Timmy. And the whole time, Uncle Matt felt like someone was listening in. He could hear a sound in the background that wasn't quite breathing. It was like someone saying, yeah, real soft. It was around this time where my dad and Uncle Matt grew up. The phone lines were all what they call party lines. Each home's phone would have a different ring so they knew who should answer. But anyone could answer or listen in on anyone else's phone call. So having someone else on the line wasn't unheard of. It was just impolite. They went to Timmy's. But when they arrived, Timmy said he didn't call them and he didn't even have a new album. Well, Uncle Matt and Dad decided to hang out with Timmy and listen to some old albums anyway. Flora was disappointed and wanted to go home, so she left by herself. He remembered thinking it was too bad she left because they found her sleep mask in Timmy's room. Well, that was the last time they ever saw her, Uncle Matt said. He was trying hard not to tear up. He said he remembered it like it was yesterday. Her little brown shoes, bows in her hair, and he said the oversized Ramones t-shirt they'd found during a trip to the city. It was her favorite band. I felt an awful pit in my stomach when he said that. I don't think I'd ever mentioned the detail about the Ramones t-shirt before. Not that Uncle Matt would pull my leg on something like that anyway. I guess it could be just a coincidence. A lot of people like the Ramones, but I've never felt so unsettled in all my life. I told him about the guy in the Ramones shirt, and he told me just to drop it because it was a long time ago. And that was all he had to say. There's a lot of what Uncle Matt said that I find strange. Like how unconcerned he seemed that Timmy hadn't made the phone call. Or the sleep mask. Like I said before, all this stuff I thought I knew about my life and my family. And now I was learning things that turned it ass over tea kettle wrong. It's all I could think about. So when Thanksgiving rolled around 2 weeks later, I bought 2 bottles of De Kuyper gin to my dad. When I first unloaded them, Dad looked at me like I was setting a trap. In a way, I guess I was. I know at least he hadn't talked to Mom. They still hate each other. But Dad's a man's man and doesn't turn down a drink. I kept waiting for the opportunity to start asking questions, but it never felt right. Turns out I didn't have to. Dad asked me if Uncle Matt talked. Yeah, but there's a lot that didn't make sense to me.
Get used to it.
I was starting to get upset with all the secrecy. We'd always been a family of straight talkers, or at least that's how we thought of ourselves. I didn't see why this was suddenly changing. So I asked him, why wasn't he more alarmed by the flashing lights in my room when the same thing happened to his little sister? Or why didn't he immediately think I was in danger when he found those pictures of me? Why didn't he do anything? He told me he did more than I'll ever know, that I was typical of my video game generation, and to go ahead and have another drink because it's Thanksgiving. I did, but I wasn't feeling very thankful. After sitting in silence for a while, which is pretty typical for us actually, he spoke.
Never let it happen where
I just waited for him to elaborate. Dad talks at his own pace.
Timmy Jean, I mean.
I hadn't expected him to say anything about Timmy. He was about as peripheral to what has happened as I could imagine. But Dad had a lot to say about him. Dad said Timmy wasn't really a bad kid. He was just strange, pale, Most other kids didn't like him. His parents certainly didn't seem to like him. Even the kids who did like him didn't really like him. The general opinion was that Timmy's parents were always gone, although it was hard to tell whether they were home or not. They kept to themselves. Rumors went around that they were brother and sister. One thing that was certain was that they'd inherited money. Unlike everyone else, they didn't keep any livestock. They just bought everything from the general store for Timmy and disappeared. Dad said today it'd be called neglect, but people watched out for each other back then. One thing that always struck Dad as peculiar was when how they wanted Timmy to go do something other than listen to records, like go play kick the can. He'd say he was going to ask his parents. None of them had seen or heard his parents in the house, so they were surprised. But Timmy would go into this one room, close the door behind him, and they'd hear him talking to someone in there. Then he'd come out and tell them that he had to stay put. This happened a few times, he said. Not that they invited Timmy Jean out all that much. Another thing he didn't like about Timmy was he'd just do strange things. Sometimes he seemed pretty normal, then he'd change, just like that. This one time, they were listening to some new record he had. He turned it off and told them he'd learned a new song and dance. Dad wasn't interested, thinking it would be childish, but Flora and Matt wanted to see. Timmy started walking backwards in a circle, shaking like he was freezing and making shrieking sounds. It was annoying the hell out of Dad, so he told Timmy to cut it out. But Timmy kept doing it. Dad had never seen Timmy show any emotion other than excitement over his records. When he was doing this dance, he looked downright hateful. Flora started crying, and Matt looked pretty scared too. Dad never had any patience for stupidity. He grabbed Timmy by the shoulders. He said he remembered how Timmy felt. His skin was cold and jelly-like, and he could feel his small shoulder bones like they weren't covered at all. He shook Timmy until he stopped. And
There's two. Why is there three of those guys?
Nothing had happened. Dad said they left because Flora was too upset. It was a little after that, Dad said, that when he
Oh no, there is three.
Couldn't remember what.
Those are four.
Timmy wasn't home. Now that was weird in itself, but
Oh, there's.
Dad went inside.
There should not be.
just in case.
There's no need for
He
four.
couldn't find him. So he decided to just ask
So you know
his
what?
parents where Timmy had
Because
gone.
there is no need to
He
have
opened the doors to the
four
room where Timmy always went
of
in.
these guys.
The room was kept really dark. They never could see anything when Timmy slipped in. And now he knew why. It wasn't actually a bedroom at all. It was just a closet. There was a cushion thrown on the floor, some bread crusts, and pieces of paper. Oh, it smelled awful. Dad said he'd seen enough. He closed the door and got out. He never went back to Timmy's again. Because when Timmy would go into that room, they wouldn't just hear Timmy talking. They'd hear someone talking to him. I'd already drank more gin than I should have, but that still sent shivers through me. But I thought of something. I asked Dad if this happened after Flora disappeared. He said no. Then how was it you were at Timmy's the day Flora disappeared?
Your Uncle Matt doesn't always remember things.
He gave me a stern stare when he said this, like it was something I should keep in mind to the end of my days. I know Dad's looks very well. He said Matt came up to him that day and had said that they got a call from Timmy to come over and listen to a new record. Dad heard the call come in, and that was nothing strange. But he never went with them to Timmy's. He went to the general store to pick up a present for Betty Coffin, a girl that he fancied. And Matt and Flora went to Timmy's by themselves. Now, when he was at the general store, he remembered being surprised to see Timmy in there just picking up some food with a big wad of bills. He'd never seen that much money in one place his whole life, so he wasn't likely to forget it. He told Timmy hello, but Timmy just paid and walked out with his food and his bills. And Flora never came home from Timmy's that day.
And that's all I know.
Uncle Matt said he was listening to music with you and Timmy when Flora left on her own. Who was he listening to music with then?
Wasn't Timmy.
I took another shot of gin right there. I hoped it would stop me from shaking. When I looked at Dad, he was staring down with a sad resignation I'd never seen him in before. My dad could drink me under the table 10 times over. So
I need you to go
he had to put me to bed on the couch.
do stuff here.
It was the end of the talk. But
Come
lying
here,
on the
please.
couch, I suddenly remembered something from way back when my family would go down to the beach. We'd all sit around the fire,
Ow.
the adults would drink and tell stories about growing up in that hamlet. And the kids would roast marshmallows and shiver listening to those stories. There were true stories and ghost stories all mixed together.
Oh,
There
that
were
hurt a
occasions
lot.
where I'd heard them ever talk about Flora before. After what my dad said,
Sir.
I remembered a story my Uncle Matt
Sir,
told. He said he and
sir,
Flora would
sir,
go for
please,
these
please,
long
sir,
walks
I
in the
want
woods
more money
My dad
to
used
buy
go
stuff
with
from
us
you.
and watch them. But once he hit his teenage years, he got
Actually,
more interested.
oh, no, you can't. So as soon as it's
He
done
decided to go
once.
back into the woods behind Hyman's general store. There are no trails or anything. They just picked a spot and went into the woods. You can go back for miles and miles into just your woods. It's all national parkland today. And normally they'd walk about 30 minutes or an hour. Dad would have them walk parallel to the edge of the woods. Without Dad there, he just kept going deeper. Well, they'd been walking into the woods for well over an hour, or at least he thought it was. Flora wanted to turn back by this time, but Matt wanted to keep going deeper and deeper.
Excuse me.
She followed him because she was scared to go off alone, but she got upset and said she was going back on her own. He told her that's fine and not to get lost. Uncle Matt said she wasn't gone 30 seconds when he felt her tugging at his arm. He got mad because he thought she was bugging him to go with her again. When he looked, she was pointing at something behind him. He said really seriously that he'd never forget how wide and scared her eyes were. He turned and saw a man standing.
I believe that is the max that
Scared him
can
too.
be.
The man didn't really look scary. He was just a man. But there was no reason for anyone to be so far out in the woods. They shouldn't even have been there. The man had his back to them, looking deeper into the woods. He wasn't moving at all. They crouched down as quietly as they could to watch him. He didn't do anything but stand there. Matt said he didn't like it one bit. He felt there was really something wrong about what was going on. He took Flora by the hand.
I should make a sheep.
He never did.
Ow.
Little sound as possible. He kept glancing behind his shoulder as they walked. After a few minutes, he was satisfied they were well away from the man. He was long.
I should probably make a sheep farm as well, actually, to make a villager.
Walking, Matt heard
Trading hall.
Flora squeezed his hand tighter, so he knew she heard it too. They didn't say anything to each other. They were too scared.
You know what? Wow.
The thudding kept getting louder. Then he heard this scream at the top of someone's lungs, like he'd been hurt. Matt looked back and saw the man they'd seen earlier running right at them, full speed through the woods, screaming the whole time. No words, just screaming. Matt said he and Flora were so scared they couldn't even run. They backed up against a tree and crouched down. Matt thought the man was going to kill them or hurt them, and he didn't know what to do about it. When the man caught up to them, he stopped short, only a few feet away. He took a deep breath and shouted in their faces. They were too scared to move, so the man kept shouting at them. Matt finally tugged at Flora and they ran back the way they came. When they were almost out, they heard Dad calling for them somewhere back in the woods. They were about to go running back to Dad so he'd protect them, but then they saw him at the tree line and ran to him. He took them home and that was that. He said they never told their mom because they figured they were just trespassing. After Uncle Matt finished his story, everyone was quiet for a good long time. The story seemed to bother Dad more than anyone else. I remember
Need to find
being
some
especially upset
gravel.
by it just because it bothered Dad. Then Dad said he remembered that when he first came to get them, he couldn't find them.
Gravel.
He figured they'd just gone home, but he couldn't find them at home either. He looked in the general store and down on the fishing wharf, but they weren't there either. So he went back to the woods. Just as he got there, he saw them running out of the woods, screaming and crying. He asked them what was going on, thinking they'd just seen a bear or something, and they just kept bawling. So he brought them home and questioned them to get the whole story. He said he never told Uncle Matt at the time, but he saw them coming out of the woods as soon as he got there. He never did call out for them. I don't know why I suddenly remembered that story. It's just another weird thing that happened to my family. Just an hour away from where Dad grew up, in the nearest bigger town, there's a huge sanitarium up on a hill. Looks over the whole town. The guy in the woods could be just some guy who got out of there and they had the misfortune of startling him. It could be completely unrelated to everything else. After Thanksgiving, little things started happening that made me uneasy. For one, my mom started calling a lot. Now, I know this isn't overtly creepy, but we normally only talk once every 2 weeks or so. On top of that, she hasn't been herself. She's been trailing off, going silent for long periods. And sometimes, it's like there's an echo when she speaks. I started wondering if someone's tapping into our conversations, like with a baby monitor or something. And she's been saying strange things. For instance, after being quiet for a while, she said,
It's lonely down here.
"What do you mean down here?" She didn't live any farther south than me. She just said it in a tone so flat she could have been reading it.
You should come. It's wonderful down below.
She changed the subject right after and seemed normal after that. My first instinct was to worry she was depressed or something. But I don't know. The last thing she said was, if I hear anything strange about her, to not believe it. I've also been receiving
Easy way to make a quick
I
buck.
started a little bit before Thanksgiving. The first call was an instant hang-up. The next time was just silence. Each time after that, I'd hear sounds. Cars going by, walking, wind.
2, 3, 4, 5,
Kinds of
6,
sounds
7.
you'd hear from a butt call. But they were distorted.
7 mil.
Almost like someone was imitating the sounds with their mouth. Last night it changed. There was a voice. The voice had a
Just
keen,
save
metallic
real
tone,
quick.
that same echo as when Mom called. The combination made the voice sound inhuman, evil. The words weren't sinister at all, but the way they were said made me feel like I was in danger for the first time since I started this investigation. The first time, all he said was, I tried to say wrong number back, but whoever it was had already hung up. I got a call a little later from the same voice. This time he didn't hang up right away. "You have the wrong number." A moment later, he hung up. On the third call. And again, hung up immediately. I kept waiting for another call any minute, but after a few hours, I relaxed. I figure it really was a wrong number, and they figured it out. I mean, given the last 2 weeks, I have every reason to be a little jumpy. I get about halfway through an episode of Gotham on the DVR before the phone rang again. I don't say anything immediately. Neither does he. And as soon as he said that, I heard a noise at the front door. I don't know if I've ever been so scared before. I don't have any firearms, but I do have a machete, so I grabbed it and went to the front door. I opened it, ready for that hateful face from the building site. Or worse. But my dad was there, actually. He asked me what the machete was for. Then I asked him what brought him out to my house so late. It's a long enough drive, and Dad rarely visits anyway. He got pretty irritated about that. He opened his flip phone and showed me a text, apparently from me. In the text, I asked him to come out immediately. It was an emergency. I told Dad I didn't send him that text. I didn't send him any text. I've never lied to Dad before, and that carries weight. He believed me. To be honest, though, I was glad he was there at just that moment. We had a drink together, and then he said he was going to go back home. I asked him a few questions about Timmy before he left. After Flora disappeared, Dad and Matt were expressly forbidden from having anything to do with Timmy. Well, for Dad, that suited him just fine. Dad nevertheless told his mom that Timmy couldn't have been responsible, since he'd just seen him at Hyman's general store. His mom said there had always been something wrong with that boy, and she felt if Flora hadn't gone to his home that day, she'd still be alive. While Dad and Matt hoped she was still alive, their mom never really believed she was. She said she saw a dove fly into the house the day after Flora disappeared, but when she chased after it, she couldn't find it anywhere. Dad said it was just grief, and these kinds of supernatural beliefs were common then. I tend to agree. Timmy made no efforts to reach out to Dad or Matt either. He started keeping to himself after Flora disappeared. And they'd sometimes see him by himself at Hyman's, buying lots of food, way more than a boy should need. They never talked. I managed to find out more about Timmy. I had to hit up people I hadn't spoken to in a long time or barely know at all. But eventually, I hit a few relatives who knew more than I ever expected to find out. So, after Flora's disappearance, suspicions about Timmy
I think
and
that's all
concerns
my
about his missing
body
parents,
can do today.
the police had looked around Timmy's house.
I'm gonna
again,
really try
since it
and
was
get
where
some
Flora
rest
was
as
last
well.
seen.
So thank you to everybody that came out.
But now they were asked to
Yeah,
search the
Mother
house.
Grace